Signing into the Circa Sports Illinois app right now to see if I can make that bet right now.
Go USA.
I've also put some Bears futures down. I've bet over Caleb Williams 35.50 for his total yardage. Cap and I were having a yardage discussion.
Oh, yeah?
At House Hall, yeah.
They may be trailing quite a bit, so maybe that number is going to go over.
Go USA, which is fine. I don't think there's a chance that he can throw for 4,000, but I don't think it's an automatic bad thing if he throws for less. I don't either. So, Circa Sports Illinois, download that app today. What do you got, Tyler?
All right. So the White Sox pulled the plug on Pedro Grifol earlier today, and everything within that organization is a mess right now. But I ask you, which is the least enviable of the two options I'm going to give you? Would you rather not be the manager for the White Sox or the one in charge of the front office right now? So Chris Getz or the manager?
I'd rather not be the manager. If you look at Jerry's front office guys, they usually have longer term jobs.
Oh, yeah, that's a good perspective. Yes.
Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams were there forever. Pax and Gar were there forever with the Bulls. AK has not had a good run, but his job status has been, confirmed to still be there. They fire coaches. They fire managers. They fire coaches. They've always done that. So I'd rather be the general manager and be in charge of personnel.
Yeah, like you get, if you're the general manager, you're buying the groceries. If you're the manager, you're playing with those nasty groceries. So,
and again, go ahead, Tyler.
Well, the one thing I would say is, in the case of the White Sox, and not saying that Pedro Grifol is going to go elsewhere and be great, but you do have the get out of jail free card. It feels like if you are eventually fired, you can move on somewhere else as opposed to having a cushy job, but not really accomplishing anything.
I would be beyond shocked if Pedro Grifol ever found himself as the manager of another in Major League Baseball.
No, I'm with you. Yeah. I agree.
He'll get a job in baseball.
Oh, yeah.
He's not going to be a manager again.
No, he will not be a manager again. But with the White Sox, I know you say it's only one of 30, but if you're worth something and you're an up-and-comer in this field, I'd be leary of taking this job.
I'm with you. That's why, listen, I would not have been shocked if when asked, AJ said, look, this is a bad job. This could be a career killer. Now, I think it's more meaningful to him because he played here and won a World Series with them. But, would you take just a random job at a really bad organization? Or would you be more concerned with your long-term prospects of being a manager of Major League Baseball? That would be a difficult decision for some, I think.
Would it be a bad look if for Sox fans, if they hired Skip Schumacher? Yes, he's a guy who has won Manager of the Year, I believe, a couple of years ago with the Marlins. But if the Marlins fire him and they pick up the manager from one of the other terrible teams in baseball, would that be another bad perception?
So they're not going to fire him because his contract, they renegotiated the Marlins and Schumacher renegotiated his contract so that he's out at the end of the season. So he technically won't be fired.
It would be like what happened with Counsell.
With Counsell or with Ross, where they just don't?
No, with Counsell, where he's like a free agent. He can kind of go wherever he wants.
Okay, so he's a free agent. And they're not just, okay.
But the word is, though, that I think the Marlins are happy to part ways for what it's worth because their season's not going well.
That'll be interesting when it happens. But all right, go ahead, Tyler.
All right. Is Pedro Grifol the worst manager / coach in Chicago in your lifetimes?
Terry Bevington was not so hot, right?
He was not so hot either. And he was in a time when they were expected to win. Didn't he manage? Was he the manager for Bell and Frank? Around one of those teams. I think he was here for a couple of years too. I still think Jim Boylan's up there.
You know what? I'm with you. I think that Jim Boylan is probably going to take the cake for me.
And I think
Didn't he install like the
time? Yeah, the you had to punch in with the clock, with the time card. There were goofy things. They revolted. Like the players revolted. Those crappy players revolted. Like after he was on the job for like 4 days.
Yeah.
Bevington was the manager in '97 for that Albert Bell, Frank Thomas.
I'm with you though. I think Jim Boylan, who by the way I believe is on the Pacers staff, isn't he?
Yeah, he's he's been a decent assistant. You just don't want him in charge of your team. So they've had their share of bad.
That's the way the Royals felt about Pedro. Decent assistant. We don't want him as the guy, the guy in charge.
And he bounced around. Like at one time he was like they're in charge of their minor leagues, and then he was their bench coach, and then they didn't hire him to be their new manager.
And then he was the ticket manager, right?
I don't know about that. No. Was he there? That would be great. All right, what's next?
All right, so after any sort of firing, there's always a list of candidates that are circulated throughout different news articles and social media and stuff like that. And one that has caught my eye is David Ross. If the White Sox were to hire David Ross, what would that do from a needle-moving standpoint for the White Sox with that hire?
I don't think they would do it.
I don't think David Ross would take the job.
That's a great point too.
That's a job where David Ross has been the manager of a team. I don't think that David Ross would take that job.
You think David Ross is going to be patient for his next job because he got burned in this last one?
Yes.
And he has a decent record.
Yes.
Like David Ross guided the Cubs. I always say this. I don't know. I still don't know if David Ross is a good manager, how good he can be. But David Ross took the Cubs through COVID. He took the Cubs through a rebuild, and then they weren't expected to be as good as they were at the end of last year, and then got fired. So for what he had been given, there were a lot of weird circumstances that David Ross had to manage through.
I don't think David Ross would take that job.
And then I think they've done that with Ricky Renteria, and I don't think they want any part of it with another former Cubs manager. And like Joe Madden, I'd call. He'd be the more like, why not call Joe? He's not in uniform though.
He's somebody who actually might consider it because I think
it'd be the ultimate challenge.
Well, I think too he understands that he probably doesn't have too many cracks at it yet again, but he seems like he still wants to be involved in baseball.
About a year ago, I had dinner with Joe. Remember this when it was after the Bears-Colts preseason game. And I asked him about the Sox job, and he said he got along with Jerry and he would be interested. Now, I don't know if he still wants to get back in the game. I would think so. He reminds me of what in Texas, what they've done.
Bochy?
Where Bochy, again, was a lot of people thought the game had passed Bochy by. He'd been out of the game for a couple of years. Joe was very good in Tampa, very good here in Chicago. It probably was dealt a bad hand in Anaheim.
Difference here is there's no way the owner's going to spend $250 million on salaries.
That's
the
very
thing with
true.
Joe Madden, though, is wouldn't he maybe be a little bit like, I guess it kind of comes down to how badly does he want to manage? Because if you want to manage just to put an MLB uniform on again, sure, go manage the White Sox. But if you want to manage to win, like we've talked about it, is this team going to be winning anything in the next 4 or 5 years? Does Joe Madden want to sit through that?
But does Joe have any other options? Like Meller said, if you want to be a manager in this league and nobody else is ringing your phone.
You may be better off, though, just drinking wine and just doing a podcast.
Or waiting for another year. And maybe you never know what job opens up.
Again, if I'm Joe Madden's agent, I present to other teams how good all those young players were under
player development.
Yes, and the culture that he set. Javi comes up, he's good. Contreras comes up, he's good. Chris Bryant comes up, he's good. And they were all good, and they all played their best under him. I'm not saying he's the reason, but there was certainly something going on there, and none of them are as good anymore.
And he did the same thing in Tampa before he got to the Cubs, so he has a track record.
So if you have guys that you believe in who could be coming up, he could be your guy that you want to hire. And the Sox aren't that team, though.
Yeah, I just, with the timeline, I don't know if Joe Madden's really the right fit there. But
again, I don't think it's somebody the White Sox would consider because Joe Madden would bring a fresh perspective, and Joe may actually say, "Hey, what the F is this stuff over here?"
At a minimum, like he should be he would be a good consultant if you were
Absolutely.
looking to hire someone.
Absolutely. But do you want, again, does Joe Madden make you uncomfortable if you're Jerry Reinsdorf? Because he's going to look at the way you've done business, and he's going to say, wait a second. No. You need to do this, and this. And I don't know that ownership wants
the thing is, to that point, Joe Madden actually is somebody who, if you look at his resume over the last decade versus Tony La Russa's, his actually trumps Tony La Russa's over the last decade.
Sure.
And my guess is that they don't want that type of, you don't want that differing voice who could say, hey, I've done it successfully my way. Why shouldn't we try it?
We've talked about Terry Francona. Again, he doesn't fit that requirement. Not that if you could get Terry Francona. But again, if I'm Terry Francona and I've had all sorts of health issues and I was managing the Guardians and I used to manage the Red Sox, why the hell am I taking...
You want to talk about medical issues?
Yeah.
Try managing that squad
for 1 year.
Yeah.
And you're probably gone.
Yes.
AJ, I think, mentioned something that Jerry, for an ownership group that's not going to spend, Terry is not interested in something like
Terry
that.
Francona is going to cost you what, $8 million a year? You
to manage the White Sox? Yeah, probably.
Well, no, I'm just saying,
in general, he's going to point to Craig Counsell and say, that's...
You want me to come out of,
Right. It's the only way you get me out.
They're not paying $8 million plus to a manager.
All right, a little bit of football for you here. So we've talked a lot about how DJ Moore's contract has given this team a lot of financial flexibility for this season, and his contract restructuring now gives them an additional $9 million. So the Bears are up to about $21 million in cap space right now. And we've talked a lot about Nate Davis and what his dead cap hit would be if they were to release him is a little over $10 million. Could DJ Moore's restructuring be a move that enables Ryan Poles to cut bait with Nate Davis?
Yes.
See,
it's a sunk cost. It doesn't cost you you still have $21 million. Even that's including Nate Davis's salary.
Right. But it's also, I look at it the opposite way, and it's what Courtney brought up. You've already paid Nate Davis this year. So while you view it as a sunk cost because you've already paid him, I look at it as a cheap backup. You have to pay. So you either pay him to not be on the team or you pay him to be your backup.
Well, what if he's not a reliable backup? He's not a reliable starter. What if he's not a reliable backup? And also, you're trying to change.
The only thing is, how will you find out, though, that he's not a reliable backup? You almost can't know that unless he's an absolute disaster inside the locker room.
Is he available? I mean, I
don't
know.
I have to cut a guy if I'm gaining something. You're not gaining anything by cutting him. You're not gaining any cap flexibility, not even a million. He's already paid for this year.
What I'm looking for is stability. If there's somebody that can replace him and there's not a drop off, then why do I want to keep a guy around? If in fact, I'm saying this is an if in fact he's not projecting the approach to the game that you're trying to instill in an offense that's now being led by a rookie quarterback.
No, I get it. And they did that with Chase Claypool. They told him to go away, and then they eventually traded him.
And I'm not suggesting that he is I have no idea. I don't know if he's a good teammate or a bad teammate. I just don't know I just know he's not available. And for an offensive line that's in flux, at the very least, I don't want to continue to rely on him. If in fact, look, this all may resolve itself by the time you get to September. I'm not dismissing that. But if you get to the start of the season and he's not up to speed, and now I've got an offensive line in flux, especially in that position with a rookie quarter, I don't want that. I want them to have whatever line is going to be the line they're going with in the opening week of the season against the Titans to start playing together.
It still took, though, what was it, Sylvia? It still took him a couple weeks to make the decision, a couple weeks into the regular season to cut bait on Chase Claypool.
Did you learn from that?
I don't know. Do we think they learned from that? Because they walked into training camp with Nate Davis as what we believe to be the starter, and it took a couple of weeks of him not practicing and re-injuring.
They also had to announce 12 guys as starters to keep Chase Claypool happy as well. So,
we've seen those, so that goes to show you the lengths they'll go to keep people happy.
Listen, they're changing Velus Jones from a receiver to a running back. I get it. I'm just trying to make the case for the other side. I consent that you guys are right, that it's very likely that whether he's starting or not, they're not going to let him go. I'm just telling you, I can build you a case if in fact they decide that they don't want, they just, you know what, he's not a reliable guy and we just want to pivot and move in a different direction.
I won't yell about that. I'm just saying that I don't believe they'll do it because they don't gain anything from it. They don't save a cent.
Like, is there some guard on the practice squad that has been like impressing to the point?
It's that Carvin guy. Jerome Carvin is the player that Joniak told us about. So Carvin, if you don't know, it's the one that Yurko was calling Clavins, Cliff Clavin. Jerome Carvin is someone that Joniak told me about on and off the air, that he's watched film on him. Last year, he was with the Chiefs, I believe, in a practice squad role. Before that, he was an offensive lineman for the Tennessee Volunteers, and he was like a 4 or 5 year starter at guard center with Tennessee, a good college program on the same line as Darnell Wright. A lot of snaps. He saw a lot of action as a good college player. He's a guard, and he's got good size too. He's not like an undersized guy. He's 6'3", 308.
So he could be Ryan Bates' backup as Shelton starts as your center.
So, yeah, exactly. And a developmental guy.
It's the old addition by subtraction theory.
What I get worried about with Nate Davis is, again, if he is healthy by the opener, he hasn't, again, practiced at all in this preseason, in this chemistry, and then being ready. Remember in the Tampa game, it was game 2. So he had barely got any reps in the preseason. Do you remember when they were down near the goal line and he whiffed or didn't know who to block? Like, these are the issues when you first get back.
It wasn't an interception return for a touchdown?
Pick 6 because wasn't it the ball deflected?
Yeah.
Was that on that play or was that a separate play?
I think it was a different play.
That was a different play, I believe. But like, there were some egregious mistakes he made early when he was first coming back. And let's not forget, Bears fans, it started where you lost your opener to the Packers. So that Tampa game was almost like a must win. You couldn't fall to 0-2 because you had the Chiefs staring you in the face for game 3. You got to win this Titans game. Game 2 is nationally televised in Houston. That's a tough game. You can't start 0-2. I don't want to take a chance that Nate Davis is coming back and then he's all of a sudden going to be rusty and not know his assignments. And this line lacks cohesion.
What I would say is nothing would surprise me. If he was ready to go September, whatever day the Titans game is, because there's a month between then and now. If he was ready to go and everything's fine, wouldn't surprise me.
I'm not starting.
It wouldn't surprise me either if, in fact, they decided because he wasn't able to practice or wasn't part of the equation that they decided to pivot and go the other direction and just move on from him.
Yeah,
would not surprise
more
me
tomorrow. I wouldn't start him because he's not going to practice for the next few weeks, and you have got to get chemistry on this line.